An elderly man met a young woman, married her, and lost over $1 million. New Yorker Jerry Needleman lost his 40-year-old wife in his 80s in 2008. The couple didn't have children, so now when being a really old man, he settled into a lonely life without rush. In the meantime, a young woman from Florida was dating an old man who'd already wasted thousands of dollars on her. The man's son took action when the couple got engaged in 2012, and then the man's family successfully charged Sylvia with fraud. A year later, Jerry was strolling the streets when he bumped into a crying woman sitting on a park bench. Yes, it was Sylvia. The old man had a good heart. He asked the woman what had happened and wondered whether she was okay. Little did he know that this was a very wrong move. Everything started at Dunkin' Donuts. A young man was sitting in his convertible, top down, in the drive-thru lane on a warm October afternoon. He wanted to order some munchkins and a cup of coffee. Then, out of the blue, some man was approaching him carrying a baseball bat. The stranger hit the young man's head with a bat and quickly ran away. The driver was shocked and tried to steer his car out of the drive-thru lane and make his way onto the street. But unfortunately, he crashed his car into another vehicle on Bergen Boulevard. The attack was something spontaneous for the victim and an elaborate plan for the brutal stranger. There was actually a twisted sequence of strange actions and reactions that led to that seemingly random assault. Everything begins with an old man and his money. He lost his wife and was completely alone, yet the money wasn't an issue for him. On August 5, 2013, Jerry Needleman, an 84-year-old retired builder, walked out of his Upper East Side apartment in Manhattan. When he was strolling through Central Park, something unusual happened. He ran into a young woman crying on a bench. She stopped Jerry, introduced herself as Sylvia Anderson, and started telling the old man about her tough fate. She just left her husband that used to beat her. She had 2 young teenage children. She was broke, sleeping on the floor, and was gonna look for a place, an apartment to live in. Jerry, now 92, remembered. Then the woman decided to ask him whether he could help her find a place. Out of all people in Central Park, Sylvia chose the perfect victim. Jerry was a man with a kind heart who'd always help people if he could. He took care of his sister, mother, and other people throughout their lives. "This is my nature. I just wanted to help her. She sounded like she needed help and I didn't think beyond that," the man said. Sylvia told him that she was in and out of hospitals and was hopeless, so the man helped her find an apartment. Moreover, he paid for the first several months as she said she was completely broke. A couple weeks later, Sylvia settled into her new apartment on East 95th Street and became Jerry's neighbor. Jerry visited his new friend regularly and was bemused to see how little the 38-year-old woman knew about life. The two spent a lot of time together and Jerry learned a lot about Sylvia's life. Well, in fact, he learned only those things Sylvia wanted him to learn. She told Jerry she became a mother at the age of 19 and that now she's already a grandmother. For the man, her story was something out of the ordinary as he lived a completely different life. He recalled how he talked about something she didn't know anything about it and got very excited. One day he showed her a map and it seemed the woman knew nothing about what she was looking at. She told him she was Kalderash, a subgroup of the Romani people that's usually referred to by the term gypsies. After a while, Sylvia wasn't a stranger anymore. She was asking the old man for a few more things and realized he was a giver. To her, he was very generous and trustful, while to him, the woman was too inexperienced and untaught. The two became really close. Sylvia visited Jerry almost every day and introduced her grandchild to him. The man also met Sylvia's son Gino, who was 19 at the time and seemed to be really ambitious. Jerry also found out they had a side business, buying, fixing, and selling used vans. Once, Sylvia plucked up the courage and told Jerry she inherited diamonds, rubies, gold, and platinum from her grandmother, but her ex-husband pawned them and the pawn shop insisted she redeem the jewels or they'd sell them. The woman asked Jerry to give her the money. The amount she needed was huge. She told him $86,000. Luckily for her, Jerry was a rich man who made his fortune thanks to a lifetime of frugal living. Jerry said he was a poor man when being young, but when he became successful, he continued to live modestly. "I had $2.5 million when I met her. I couldn't have spent $2.5 million the way I live, no matter how long I live." Jerry also liked Sylvia's son. When the woman said Gino was about to get married and needed $60,000 for a dowry for her girl's family, the man handed over the money. In fact, for the next 2 years, Jerry paid for everything Sylvia asked him to. In a while, there was another $50,000 for Sylvia's daughter who had a custody issue. Later, Sylvia started enjoying expensive clothes, furniture, jewelry, phones, and vacations. But what did Jerry get in return? Well, it was Sylvia's deep gratitude, for a while. Over time, Gino's wedding failed. Then he met another girl and obviously needed $60,000 dowry to be paid one more time. What do you think Jerry did that time? Yeah, he paid for it. And when that marriage also fell through, the man handed over the money for a third time. You'd probably suspect something and notice red flags, but Jerry was blinded and didn't listen to anyone. "I'm all alone," he said. He and his late wife Giddy had no kids. Jerry was part of a group of retirees that met in Central Park every Saturday. His mates listened to his story about Sylvia, who'd already become an important part of their dear friend's life. He introduced me to her, said he was dating somebody and wanted me to meet her. 78-year-old Mike Stern, a retired jewelry manufacturer, recalled. Stern recalled, "Immediately my defenses went up. Jerry's not a young man and this girl is attractive, let's put it that way." But the man felt he didn't have enough power to interfere in his friend's life. Other retirees were less restrained. "They thought I was crazy," Jerry said. "Jerry, this girl's not for you," was the lesson they tried to teach him. Then one day, Jerry opened his door to a New York City police detective. The detective warned Jerry he had no reason to trust Sylvia. Based on another investigation, he said the woman was a sweetheart swindle who was just scamming the old man. However, Jerry refused to make any complaint. "Can't help you," is what Jerry told him. "I thought about what you said to me and I believe I can correct everything," he continued. Jerry told the detective Sylvia had to face a lot of challenges throughout her life, and given the opportunity to live a proper one, she'd turn out to be a good lady. Jerry saw in Sylvia the kind of companionship he was thirsting for. At some point, Sylvia even started expressing her love for him, both verbally and in writing. She said she'd love him forever and that when he died, she'd jump in a box. She sent him letters with promises of eternal love and care. And then it happened. 2 years after their historic meeting in the park, Sylvia dared to make her biggest request. At some point, she pleaded with me to marry her. When she did it, the old man confessed he didn't plan to get married once more. He even admitted that he didn't find her attractive. Certainly, there was no romantic interest. At 85, I wasn't looking for a hot young dame. But day by day, Sylvia managed to convince him and Jerry gave in. I was growing old, frail, and I didn't want to end up in a nursing home. Rather naively, he believed Sylvia would take care of him because of what he'd done for her and her family. He thought that she'd keep her promises and take care of me in old age. On September 8, 2015, a sunny and warm Tuesday, Jerry and Sylvia arrived in the New York City's clerk office. The civil ceremony was short and lovely. Sylvia put on a matronly blue skirt suit with a blue necklace, while Jerry wore a shirt of hope. Stern, Jerry's friend, was his best man. You're thinking to yourself, "Jerry, what are you doing? What are you doing?" But he did it, Stern said. And I know what you're also thinking. Was their relationship sexual? According to Jerry, they had sex twice before they married when she talked me into it. After getting married, they never slept together again. Never, never, as Jerry recalled. He also said she'd go somewhere until 3 in the morning and from time to time never came home. She didn't cook him breakfast and sometimes prepared a gypsy dish that made me sick, he remembers. Just in a few weeks after the ceremony, it became crystal clear Jerry wouldn't have the marriage he dreamed of. Sylvia's moods were also unforeseeable and uncertain. Moreover, she did an even worse thing. She got back with her ex-husband. Can you believe it? Sylvia moved to Bowie, Maryland for a year. She explained her son was finally getting married and needed her there. 2 weeks later, she posted a photo of her and her ex-husband celebrating their 23rd wedding anniversary on Instagram. Although Sylvia was barely present in Jerry's home, she managed to redecorate his apartment, the one the man had lived in since he married his first lovely wife Giddy in 1958. Sylvia purchased a bulky, fake jeweled white sofa to match the same chairs, a new chandelier that didn't work, and a lot of other things just for show. Jerry watched his home transform and couldn't believe his eyes. Not only was his new wife meeting her ex, but she also reunited with a man she'd known since her teenage years. The man was named Danny Eli, but people called him Danny Chams. Sylvia secretly rented an apartment close to her and Jerry's to have secret meetings with her lover. Finally, Jerry found out and made him lose his patience. For him, enough was enough. Jerry may have been lonely and trustful, but he wasn't foolish. The only problem was that all his relatives were dead. All the good friends, 3 of them, all died in 1 year, Jerry explained. His retiree friends thought he was crazy. Those people who knew Jerry's first wife just couldn't get how he could bear someone like Sylvie. Jerry was alone when he came up with a decision to file for divorce in May 2017. He also accused Sylvia of stealing his money. Defendant scammed me out of at least $1,836,725, he wrote. When Sylvia found out Jerry was about to leave her, she started begging him to give her one more chance. She promised she'd fix everything, that she'd take care of him. Unfortunately, her plan worked out, and the two remarried on August 24, 2017 at the same city clerk's office, but with no best man this time. But 6 days after, Jerry filed for an annulment. She was lying again, he recalled. She started asking him for money again. Then Sylvia moved out of their apartment during the first week of November 2017. She fled in anger. I never saw her again after that. After 4 years of fraud, Jerry finally opened his eyes. She pretended to love me. The whole purpose was to get my money. My judgment was terrible, he confessed, but judgment isn't criminal. What she did was criminal. Once he realized that that detective was just right when he told Sylvia's irregular sweetheart swindle, Jerry started looking for help. Luckily for him, he met Bob Nygaard, an ex-cop turned private investigator. Bob's specialty was investigating scams, especially sweetheart frauds and money diggers. Let's turn back to Sylvia's ex-husband, Sonny Gordo Nicholas. The whole story about Sylvia's marriage to Jerry was an open secret in their family. 47-year-old Gino's father was Sylvia's common-law husband, and when he found out about her love affair with Danny Champs in their secret apartment, he was more than furious. He took to Instagram to express his anger, quote, "Nothing but a pure garbage Jezebel." Gordo and Gino decided to visit Danny Champs. Danny lived in a small house in Ridgefield, New Jersey. They drove there and waited outside watching, according to the police report. Next door to Danny lived a 20-year-old medical assistant named Charbel Shaul. That afternoon, Shaul's sister with her daughters decided to pay him a visit. Charbel offered to go to Dunkin' Donuts to grab them some coffee and munchkins. The man sat in his convertible and started moving. His side of the driveway was being blocked by his sister's car, thus Shaul had to go off course into his neighbor Danny's side to get out. Gordo and Gino thought it was Danny who was leaving his home. Meanwhile, Mr. Shaul drove to Dunkin' Donuts and drove into the drive-thru lane. "It felt like an asteroid hit my head," Shaul recalled. Since he hit another vehicle, the police supposed he was injured from the car accident instead of the bat to his head. But a bit later, the doctors in the hospital noticed something was wrong. Serious skeletal and soft tissue injuries which were inconsistent with a motor vehicle collision, the Fort Lee police reported. Doctors had to remove a part of his skull due to the brain swelling. The poor boy had to spend 2 weeks in intensive care due to his serious condition. 2 months later, Shaul had one more surgery where he got a titanium plate in his head. What was the result? Well, the man was confused and lost his ability to easily focus. "My mind's been so ruffled up," Shaul complained. Luckily, 9 days after the accident, Gordo and his son were arrested as video evidence showed Gordo was the one who hit Shaul. They were then accused of attempted murder and both pleaded guilty. A couple of months later, the police decided to visit Shaul, who was still recovering at home. They accused him of having more than 10,000 inappropriate images of children on his computer and also for sharing them. Shaul blamed the assault for his words. "You drop into a different world," he stated. "My mind wasn't exactly there much at the time. I tripped into this weird world I wish I never found." Bob Nygaard, a private investigator, started digging into Sylvia's past. He found out she'd changed names over the years and worked as a palm reader in different states, such as New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Florida. Moreover, he found out Jerry wasn't the only one who was a victim. Sylvia scammed an 80-year-old widower in 2011. It was Samuel Silver Jr., a retired executive with Shell Oil who lived in Orlando and came across her at a grocery store. She used the same scenarios and told Samuel about her abusive ex, teenage children, no home or money. In other words, she pretended she had really hard fate. In 3 months, Samuel presented Sylvia an $11,000 engagement ring and a $58,000 Cadillac Escalade. He also gave her over $28,000 for food and lodging. Luckily, there was Samuel's son, who didn't like the whole situation and confronted Sylvia. Samuel successfully sued her for fraud while the woman refused to answer questions, pleading the fifth in a 2012 deposition. A year later, she met Jerry in Central Park. Fortunately, in the final days of his and Sylvia's relationship, Jerry wrote the confession and she signed. It stated, "Needleman gave me credit cards on which I spent $10,000 to $20,000 per month and sometimes more. He provided $60,000 to buy each of 3 wives for her son." Jerry brought this evidence to the district attorney's office, but it didn't help much. The man was told he did everything from his own goodwill. When Jerry filed for a second divorce, Sylvia's lawyer Jerry D'Angelo said he didn't expect her to be accused of a crime. Their marriages were based on love and respect for the other person, he stated. One morning, Danny Champs opened the door and the stranger in front of him started telling him a chain of events that led to the attack of a man who the assaulter believed was him. "Sounds like you have the whole story. I don't know what you need me for," Danny said. "I have no comment. I'm afraid for my life." Meanwhile, Sylvia, the only thread that connects all these stories, moved to Paramus, New Jersey and wasn't home for an explanation. Nygaard also found out that Sylvia had a sister who had actually tried to scam Jerry 2 weeks before he met Sylvia in the park. Sandra Cooter Anderson, her sister, has been arrested for some sweetheart scams in the past. Jerry even wrote her 2 checks for $10,000, but then he canceled them. In the park, Sylvia also used the name Sophia Anderson. She tried a different method with Jerry and won. According to Nygaard, the sweetheart swindlers don't usually work in a team, but this case was an exception. It's a bit weird, but Sylvia and Sandra's family, Sylvia's husband and lover, were willing to help and solve the case. Sylvia's husband proved Sylvia didn't have any jewels, and it was just a ruse to get $86,000 out of Jerry. Obviously, those 3 dowry payments for Gino were also scams. Nygaard met Gino, who told him, "Bob, I was never getting married like that. It was never any 60,000 dowries that were needed." Gino said he was unaware of his mother's dirty tricks. He stated, "Bob, my mom's been conning this old man for the last couple of years." The son also added that he's had enough of it and I'll go to the police with you and I'll do whatever has to be done to have her arrested. The private detective calculated Jerry Needleman had lost a total of $1.78 million. So what had happened to the elderly man after being wiped of his life savings? Jerry told Nygaard that he had to start working, but nobody would want to give him a job due to age discrimination. Jerry was about to lose his home, but luckily some long-lost relative helped him and, along with some other relatives, paid off his bills. At least he had a roof under his head. But what about Sylvia? Bob stated nothing happened to Sylvia at all. Meanwhile, Jerry's still trying to find a way to get his money back, while Bob's looking for someone in law enforcement who will agree to take Jerry's case on and take it to court. Due to the fact that Jerry gave all his money willingly, the law enforcement doesn't seem to take his scam case seriously. However, as Nygaard points out, it's a total misconception. He said Jerry's not an elderly man in these situations that's looking to pick up a hot young woman. This is an elderly person who's scared that they're not going to be able to take care of themselves. The Federal Trade Commission (FTC) stated that people between 40 to 69 are the ones who lost money to romance scams at the highest level, while people over 70 reported the highest individual losses. The sweetheart swindle is the scam that's the most harmful emotionally for its victims because they fell in love, trusted their beloved ones, and were deceived by them in the end. But let's remember that oodles of swindlers look for their victims online as well. So please, don't be blind, choose carefully who to start chatting to, and stay safe.